Hej och hjärtligt välkomna hit allesammans. Om det är någon som fortfarande står i tamburen så finns det en handfull platser här allra längst fram. Så smyg in på ett diskret sätt. Jag heter Lars Anders Johansson och arbetar som kulturansvarig här på Timbro. Då kom det mer än en handfull helt plötsligt smygande. Men det finns nog plats för alla. För ett år sedan, lite drygt, så arrangerade vi på 1 maj en stor lanseringsfest för återpubliceringen av Ayn Rands böcker på svenska. Och det är glädjande att se att det fortfarande efter ett år blir fullt hus när vi bjuder in till Ayn Rand-seminarium. Jag hoppas att det ska bli någon form av årligt återkommande aktivitet. Det är valår i Sverige och inom borgerligheten så är det en vanlig hållning att man ska försöka dölja sina ideologiska utgångspunkter i möjligaste mån och flytta sig så långt mot mitten som möjligt. Det är inte en uppfattning som vi på Timbro delar, utan vi tänker istället att det kan vara värt att ett sånt här år lägga extra mycket fokus på den underliggande filosofin och de ideologiska utgångspunkterna bakom borgerliga värderingar. Så därför så är det en stor glädje att idag kunna presentera Tara Smith från the University of Texas i Austin och the Ayn Rand Institute samt Carl Rudbeck som är mångårig Timbro-medarbetare som kommer att delta i ett samtal lite senare. Vi säljer också de här boxarna här utanför om det är någon som mot förmodan inte skulle ha en sådan. Och har ni en sådan så är den förmodligen sönderläst vid det här laget, så då finns det goda skäl till att köpa en ny. Med de orden så lämnar jag över ord och golv till Tara Smith. Welcome, Tara.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And thank you very much for having me, Timbro. I'm very happy to be here. I won't thank you for the introduction since I have no idea what you said. I don't know. But thank you all very much for coming on your lunch hour. I'm going to talk about Ayn Rand's moral philosophy today. She's mostly known for, well, she's known for her fiction, she's known for political philosophy. She very much thought the moral philosophy is the foundation for the political philosophy. When people know of her moral philosophy, they know that she advocated egoism. I mean, she wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. And most people equate that with immorality. I mean, most of us are raised thinking that the good person, the moral man, is the selfless man. The man who gives to others, who does for others, who places others above himself, right? Politically, pretty much across the spectrum, whether you're on the left or the right on political issues, you just assume that to be a moral person is to be a giver, right? Mother Teresa, that's the kind of person we uphold as the saint. The philanthropist, the person who gives away the wealth that he might have earned, right? The person who serves soup to the homeless or builds buildings for the poor, right? That is the epitome of a moral person in most people's minds. Service to others. Back in the States these days, this is commencement season. It's the time of year when most of our colleges and universities have their graduation ceremonies. And I assure you, with all of the commencement speakers are telling the graduates, whenever you read the excerpts every season, it's all about, now that you've graduated, son, it's your turn to give back to the community. Now it's your turn to serve something higher than yourself. Service. Everybody agrees except Ayn Rand with that idea. So that's what I want to try to spin out today. And the handout, the sheet of paper on your seats, gives you a very simple outline of the things I'm going to touch on. I'd like to touch on a number of different aspects of her moral philosophy quickly, and then we can pick up in the discussion portion on whatever things are of most interest to you. So I am going to be going fairly quickly just to give you an overview. Okay? First, terminology. Egoism. She's defending egoism. What do I mean by that? Basically, the idea that your primary interest should be your own well-being. That's her view. That egoism is primary concern with your own well-being. That a person should be pursuing his own self-interest. So please notice, Ayn Rand's view is prescriptive. She is not saying that she thinks everybody is self-interested. You know, many people believe that. They say, oh, everybody's always self-interested at bottom. That is not her view. Okay, that's a separate question, and that is not what she actually believes. But she thinks you should be self-interested. Now, why? Why be an egoist? Why does that make sense? At a very simple level, because you have to be. Because it's the nature of life. It's the nature of a human being's life that you need to take care of yourself in order to keep yourself going. That's just a fact of our nature. Think about it in the simplest terms. If you don't tend to your health, you'll get sick, right? If you don't feed yourself, you'll starve. If you don't earn a living, you won't have the money you need to feed yourself. These are very basic facts. They're not a matter of choice. They're not a matter of taste. They're just a matter of our nature. We have needs. We need to fulfill these in order to keep on going. Now, with these simple examples I just gave, you got to feed yourself, you got to earn a living, right? They're pretty innocuous. I mean, we don't object normally when you're making a living. We think that's a good thing. You ought to make a living to be able to sustain yourself. But in doing that, you are acting in your own self-interest, as you should. Think for a minute just about a small child. The newborn baby in the first weeks and months of its life, let alone, you know, as it grows a little older, becomes a year old, 2 years old. Think about all of the things that a child, an infant, starting from infancy, right, needs to do and does do that we applaud its doing. Think about when the baby is first, oh, okay, good, it's sucking now, it's grasping, you know, it's reaching and crawling and eventually walking and talking and doing all these wonderful things. And we're thrilled, right? We're the people who care about that baby. Oh, that's wonderful. Notice, in doing all of these things, that child is acting for its own interest. Now, it's not thinking about it, obviously. It's way too young to be thinking and choosing and deliberately, you know, having internal debates about these things. But in doing all of these things that we urge it to do, it is acting in ways that serve its well-being, its eventual fitness to lead its own life, to be responsible for itself, right? That's a good thing. It's a good thing not just for babies, though. It's not just small children who need this. Each of us needs to be acting in our own interest in many different ways our whole life long. Indeed, this applies not just to human beings, it applies to any organism because of the nature of life. Again, obviously, just as a baby doesn't deliberate and decide, oh, I better have that milk, that will be good for me, or something like that. It is not that a plant or a tree or a lower animal decides, oh yes, I think I will undergo photosynthesis, that will be good for me. Obviously, a lot of what happens, I mean, for lower organisms, it's all genetic, it's all just hardwired in, so to speak, right? And even for human beings, you don't need to put digest on the to-do list for tomorrow morning, right? No, you know, digest this lunch. Hopefully that's just happening on its own, okay? But there are obviously a lot of other things you do need to think about and, you know, to weigh alternatives and to make choices and then to act on those choices. It's just a further reflection of the fact that you have needs, not just wants, not just desires, which, okay, you could live without this or that. You have, I mean, it is the nature of a living organism of any sort that there are needs that have to be fulfilled if you are to live, if you are to prosper, right? If you are to last. Parenthetically, let me just notice that even while most people celebrate selflessness, right, and praise being sacrificial, giving to others, putting others first, there are a number of areas, little pockets in life, where we do think it's perfectly appropriate for you to be self-interested. Right? If you ask for a raise at the office, now I can't say I know enough about economic relations here in Sweden to know, but I mean normally at least, a lot of times somebody will think, gee, maybe I really should ask for a raise. I've been at this company a long time, I've been doing really good work, they know I'm doing good work, you know. We often encourage that, yeah, you should ask for a raise, you should get yourself more money, despite the fact that, man, that'd be good for you if you got it, right? We don't think, oh, that's a deal breaker. That means you shouldn't ask for that. We think, even though it's in your interest, yeah, you should do that. We have in a different realm, I don't know if you have an expression comparable to this, but sometimes when you're giving, let's say, relationship advice to a friend, you'll say, yeah, don't be a doormat. Don't let him treat you like that. Don't let him walk all over you. I mean, I'm sure you have expressions like that, right? Don't be a doormat. Well, notice what we're saying there is stand up for yourself. Yeah, it's good. It makes perfect sense to stand up for yourself sometimes. Or more generally, if you're attacked. I mean, you know, somebody's trying to pick your pocket or something like that. Self-defense. Yes, self-defense. My point here is very simple. There are these pockets where we think it's perfectly reasonable to self-interested, and I think they reflect the fact that you have to be self-interested. Again, that's the main point I was making here, right? It's natural, it's necessary, you need to be self-interested. The alternative, putting others first, not a sustainable policy, right? People talk about sustainability these days. Try living on that. Try living on putting others first consistently, 100% of the time. Couldn't possibly work, okay? So, again, moving right along here, trying to move quickly. There's a sense in which you can say, egoism is the only way to live. Literally, it's the only way to live. Have to act to fulfill your needs. Though as soon as I put it that way, the only way to live, you may well be thinking, now wait a second. We can put you on life support, right? We can pump nutrients and fluids into his body and keep him alive. It goes on in hospitals all over the world every day, right? So let me now try to become a little bit clearer about what I mean, what Ayn Rand means by self-interest when she says you should pursue your own self-interest. What does that look like, right? What is being a successful egoist when you've got what it is you're aiming for? What is that? What is the character of that well-being? Well, the goal isn't simply breathing. When she says you should act for your own life, your own well-being, she doesn't mean simply stay alive, right? Such that we can't yet put you 6 feet under. She's not talking about, well, there's still a heartbeat there. There's still a technical life in the scientific, sterile sense of the term. No, she's talking about what it is to be a healthy human being in the full dimensions of what it is to be a human being. And a human being is more than a body. Obviously, we have bodies. Bodies are important. Right? I mean, we are material beings. But we're not solely material beings. So to feed the well-being of a human person requires more than keeping them above ground, right? Keeping them, keeping the pulse going. And here again, let's think by analogy for a minute. In medicine, how do we gauge wellness or health for a human being? Or even if you think of the veterinarian where you bring your pet, you bring your dog to the vet, right? How do we know how healthy the dog is, or the duck is, or the whale is, or whatever kind of organism we might be talking about? Well, the question that's posed is basically, is this specimen, this particular animal, this dog, or this duck, is it acting, is it operating in a way that is most conducive to its flourishing, to the best kind of life that a dog can have, right? We don't impose standards that are appropriate for other kinds of animals, for cats or giraffes or other sorts of things, right? But there's a best kind of life that a dog can have. There's a best kind of life, what we think of as a healthy life that a duck can have or that a human being can have. But that basically is the kind of question we're asking to gauge medical health. And again, here we know human beings, we're physical, we have bodies, we care about our medical health, we need to, right? But we also have minds. There's a lot more to our lives and our well-being than our material medical condition, right? There's your emotional life, your psychological life, your sense of fulfillment. I mean, a person can be alive, they could be healthy as hell, right? They could be just a robust, wonderful specimen physically and kind of miserable. We all know that from experience, right? Our own experience, the experience of others. So when Rand talks about act for your interest, for your well-being, she really means all facets of that. A human life going as well as it can for a human being, right? How good does it get? How good can it get? That's the kind of model that she holds out as living for yourself, for your self-interest. You want to be actualizing all aspects of what a human life can be. Aristotle spoke of eudaimonia. Anybody familiar with a little bit of Aristotle here? Anybody, a few of you? Aristotle spoke of eudaimonia, usually translated in English in one of two ways. We use the term flourishing, or we use the term happiness to translate that. Let me say just a word on each of those. Flourishing, I love that translation because it gets at the activity of a happy, proper human life. I should say, eudaimonia, in Aristotle's view, is the highest good for humans to aspire to, right? Yeah, money counts, yeah, wealth counts, yeah, friends count. He goes through a number of things that all have real value in a good human life. But the highest value is a life of flourishing. Okay, I'm sorry, a life of eudaimonia. And again, this one translation of it that says it's a life of flourishing, I think is a good translation in that it gets at the fact that when you are living that best kind of human life, you are living your life in a certain way. It is an activity. It's a process, right? It's the way you're leading your life. Similarly, the term eudaimonia is often translated as happiness. Now, the downside, I think, of that term is that it can be misleading in that we often speak of a person as happy in a more superficial or fleeting way. That is, sometimes I'll say, oh, yeah, I'm happy. You know, the Giants won last night. Or, you know, Sweden beat Denmark in the football match or whatever it might be, right? And there is a kind of fluctuating day-to-day mood that can vary with these sorts of events. Oh, the sun came out. I'm so happy. I wanted to play tennis this afternoon, right? Sure, you can be happy in that sense. But when we speak about a good human life, a flourishing human life, there, when we talk about being happy, we're talking about something deeper. We're talking about something more settled, where I know that my life can be going well and I'm a happy person despite the fact that, damn it, my team lost last night, or it's raining again and I'm not going to be able to play golf today or something like that, okay? But again, I just want to get at the happy life. Again, this is all to get at what is in your interest. What is that good life that you're aiming at if you're a rational egoist, as Ayn Rand endorses, right? Well, you're looking for the kind of life in which you are genuinely flourishing. You are that healthy specimen of a human being. You're genuinely flourishing, and you're feeling the rewards of that. You feel efficacious. Your life basically has a good vibe to it. So in that sense, you're both flourishing and happy, again, in that respect, all right? There's something really important, though, to appreciate about happiness, well-being in the way that I've just described it. You can't transfer it to other people. Happiness, this kind of flourishing, this kind of well-being, it's not the kind of thing you can give somebody else, which I think is a really simple fact, but a profoundly important fact. I can help you in a lot of ways. There are all sorts of things that we can do for one another that make a difference, that have a real serious impact. And again, I'm sure you all know this. You all know this both from being the beneficiaries and the benefactors sometimes with other people. We can help each other in all sorts of ways, material and mental or emotional or psychological. But I can't live for you. I can't want for you on your behalf, right? You know what it is to want something, to really want something and care about something in your soul. I can't do that for you. I can't want for you. I can't achieve for you. I can't achieve on your behalf. I can't feel for you. I can't feel the satisfaction of having really wanted something and worked hard to get it and gotten it. That achieving. I can't give you that. I can't feel for you. I can't flourish for you. Again, I do not mean in any way to deny the real impact we can have on one another and the very significant ways in which I can, you know, if I'm wealthy enough and I love you enough, I can give you a lot of money and pay for your education. Maybe I can fund that serious medical treatment that you need. I mean, there are serious ways in which we can help one another. But I can't make you a happy person. I can't make you flourish. I can't give you well-being. And if I'm right about that, then the further implication is to spend my time trying to make other people happy, trying to give them well-being, is a waste of time. It's a sinkhole. And so that, again, is why I think this fact, and, you know, we can talk about it, whether or not you see it as a fact or just Tara's hypothesis, right? But if that is a fact, that's an important pillar underneath the idea of Ayn Rand that you should act to make yourself happy and you should act to make yourself happy. Okay. So what kind of egoism is Rand talking about? I think this is 4 if you are following on the handout. Hopefully we have a little clearer picture of what she means by the self-interest, the well-being that you should be aiming at. What then does she mean by egoism, the pursuit of self-interest? Well, I'll try to be really quick here. Conventional image of the egoist is a pretty nasty, rotten person that I would want no part of and that she wants no part of. I mean, typically the egoist is conveyed as out to rip off other people, out to exploit, out to walk all over other people, dog eat dog. If I have to hoodwink you, you know, by hook or by crook, I'll do whatever it takes. I could care less about you or the effects of my actions on others. I'm selfish in the narrowest, most self-absorbed, antisocial sense. Inconsiderate to the nth degree, right? I just use people like bananas. I take the fruit and I throw the peels, you know, by the wayside. What's wrong with that picture? From Rand's perspective, what's wrong with that picture? It's not just, ooh, that's ugly. That's not the path to flourishing. That's not the way to lead the best kind of life that a human being can lead. That's not actually in my interest, to treat other people that way, to be that sort of day by day, mood by mood, I do whatever I feel like it. That's stupid. That's self-defeating. Rand stresses what she calls rational egoism. And if you think for a minute about, I mean, I'm sure some of you are parents. Think about the kinds of futures that you wish for your children. When you wish every happiness in the world for their futures, you're probably not wishing, yeah, and if you can get away with scams and frauds and ripping off other people, man, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you'll have it made. That's all. I mean, really? Think about whether or not you have children. I mean, think about what we often wish for other people, like on big occasions, on those commencement days, the graduation days, and you wish the young graduate all the happiness in the world. Now as he, you know, embarks on his future. Or the young married couple and you wish them all the happiness, or that new baby who's born and you, oh, every success. Right? Is that what you wish for that person? That kind of life? No. What do you wish for them? Mentally calculating here what I should do, if I should stick with. But let me say, before I get to what you should wish for them, or at least an indirect way of answering that question, let me quickly disabuse a few of the further conventional associations that people have with egoism from Rand's egoism. Okay, on her view, the egoist, the proper egoist, is not an emotionalist who simply does whatever his emotions drive him to do on a given occasion. He's not a subjectivist in that There are things that are in your interest, and there are things that are not in your interest, and what those are isn't simply up to you. Rather, they emanate from certain facts about you independently of your beliefs about them. So she's not a subjectivist, though she is an egoist, right? She's not a hedonist. Hedonism says pleasure is the good, right? If it feels good, it is good. That's the standard, pleasure. Rand says self-interest, that's the yardstick of morality and of virtue, right? Well, pleasure and interest, they're not the same thing. They often overlap, which is really nice, right? A lot of times, doing something that's genuinely good for you is also enjoyable or pleasurable, right? That's terrific. A lot of people enjoy certain kinds of exercise that are also really good for them, health-wise, right? Sometimes you really enjoy a book that you learn a lot of useful information from. So pleasure and interest frequently overlap, but they don't necessarily, right? Going to the dentist isn't very pleasurable typically, but sometimes it's really good for you. Telling off the boss would feel really good sometimes, but might not be good for you, right? So my point is, again, egoism, don't confuse it with hedonism. Not the same thing as just pursuing pleasure. It's not materialism either. Now here again, material wealth, material well-being is wonderful. I definitely prefer it to the alternative, but it's not the whole of life. We can come back and talk about that if you want a little bit more. Even Ayn Rand, who loves money, who praises money, right? She's not a materialist. She doesn't think money is the only thing in the world, the only important value. So don't equate egoism with that. All right, there are still more things that egoism isn't, but I don't want to spend too long on that. But I'm just trying to disabuse us of some of the conventional associations that we have. You really want to get, hers is a distinctive form of egoism and self-interest. So, if I've, again, I hope clarified some of what she is not talking about, let me now say a little bit more directly what she is advocating, okay? How to be a rational egoist. Basically, she thinks what you need to live a good, flourishing human life that will be a happy life, that will be in your interest, is you need a set of virtues. You need certain core principles that guide you in making the kinds of decisions that you face every day. A quick trot through some of these, well, through all of these, okay, but a very quick trot. The single foundational virtue, the master virtue, call it whatever you want, but the single virtue, the most important one, is leading your life by reason, by rationality. You go by the evidence, you go by logic, which in some ways sounds pretty straightforward until you think about all the alternatives that people go by, right? They go by authority. Well, that's what so-and-so said, you know, and he really knows what he's talking about, or he's the revered figure, or they are the revered figures, the experts in this field, right? You go by authority. You go by popularity. This is what most people think. You go by tradition. This is what everybody has thought for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? You go by what you feel like doing or by your emotion. You go by mysticism. You go by faith. There are all these alternative ways of making decisions. The selfish way, because it's the practical way, the only realistically feasible way of making decisions, Rand recognizes, is by reason, by evidence, by logic. Okay? That, again, is the central virtue. But then she spells out 6 further applications, you might say, applications of reason to distinct kinds of decisions that we're all called upon to make on an ongoing, regular basis. Okay? For example, so how should I deal with other people? Other people, man, they're all around you, you know, can't get rid of them. Here they are in this room facing me, which is a lovely thing, right? A lot of people here. How do you deal with other people? How would it make sense for a rational egoist to deal with other people? Justly, through the virtue of justice, by which she means you judge other people objectively and you treat them accordingly. You give them what they deserve, you know, positive or negative, right? But basically, this makes sense because other people affect us, even without trying to. It's not that I mean, I've got my life to live, right? You don't. But even without trying, we often affect one another in ways big and small. You affect what another person cares about and vice versa. Think about a few quick examples here. Who you go to work for, you accept that job, right? Well, you want them to be a reliable party. You want to know that that paycheck is going to come through every week or whatever it might be, right? Or that, yes, they're actually going to ask you to do the things they told you they would ask you to do when they interviewed you for the job and so on. Who you go to work for, that's going to affect your well-being. Who you hire, right, if you're the small business owner, that's going to affect you. Who you take a ride from, right? Who you have babysit your children while you're here, you know, tonight if it's a nighttime or something, right? I mean, again, in countless ways, we affect one another. We affect one another's values, the things that we care about. So it makes sense to try to judge other people objectively and treat them accordingly. It makes sense from a self-interested perspective, because if I fake your character, if I have real signs that you're not too reliable a worker or whatever it might be, I'm kidding myself. Faking who you are doesn't change who you are, doesn't change the effects of who you are and how you act on the things I care about, right? So, again, that's just one example of a kind of virtue in day-to-day practical living. Judge other people objectively, treat them accordingly. Let me go through a few more virtues. How should I deal with my material needs? Basically here, Rand says, through the virtue of productiveness. Create the material values that you need to create in order to keep yourself going. Again, based on a very simple fact. We have needs. We have material needs. We need to shape things to meet our needs. So cultivate the virtue of productiveness. Cultivate productive characteristics in yourself. I have to act. I have to fulfill my needs. I need to think in order to do that. How should I deal with my mind? How should I deal with the fact that you all have minds and you all have opinions? Whose should I go by? How should I set my compass? Here, she talks about the virtue of independence. Use your own judgment. Learn from others. Gather information from others. Seek out the opinions of others. But think for yourself. In the end, the only way to really think is to exercise your mind, your reasoning capacity on whatever the material, the issue that you're thinking about. So she speaks of independence as making one's own way in the world, intellectually as well as materially, as well as in pulling your own weight financially, let's say. Okay. How should I deal with my mind in another respect? Not just thinking about my mind vis-a-vis your minds and the fact that various people will have different opinions and beliefs about different issues. Forget about other people or other minds for a minute. How should I deal with the world out there, just the sort of metaphysically given world? Here, Rand talks about the virtue of honesty. What she basically says is not faking things. I mean, interestingly, when most people talk about honesty, they think about not lying to other people, right? That's just the conventional understanding of what it is to be honest, is you don't mislead other people. Well, now, in Rand's view, that's part of what honesty is, but honesty is much broader and much deeper than that. Honesty is the policy of, I don't fake it. I don't fake it to you, but I don't fake it to myself either. And most people, I think, in my experience at least, most people, they're not seriously contemplating lying to others much of the time. Right? I mean, most of us are not going through life thinking, how can I mislead somebody else? But we spend a lot of time deceiving ourselves or kind of trying to kid ourselves. Oh, sure, I can afford that sofa. Well, no, if I can't afford the sofa, I can't afford the sofa, right? If I really should call the doctor to check on that annoying symptom that I'm kind of worried about, then I really should call the doctor to do that, right? I mean, the point here is faking things doesn't change them. That's why it makes sense to be honest. So don't pretend, don't evade, don't re-describe. You're not helping yourself. It's not practical, it's not self-interested to fake things, all right? Again, we can come back to that if you want to talk more about her view versus some other views. Two last virtues here, and then I will wrap up soon, okay? Suppose I've exercised my independent judgment. I've been a good reasoner. I've reached some conclusions. How should I deal with those conclusions that I've reached? Through the virtue of integrity. Practice what you preach. If you really believe it, act that way. If you find out you were wrong, change the belief and change the action, right? But integrity she sees as the virtue of acting in accordance with your convictions, with your values, even when there's pressure to do otherwise. And finally, how should you deal with yourself, your own character? How should you judge yourself? How should you assess what you've done in the past? How should you conduct your future? Through the virtue of pride. By pride, now notice, pride, I thought that was one of the 7 deadlies, right? That's supposed to be a bad thing. No, pride is a virtue on Ayn Rand's view. And here again, she's like Aristotle in this. He also considered it a virtue. But by pride, she doesn't mean pat yourself on the back all the time, tell yourself how wonderful you are. She means hold yourself to high standards. Moral ambitiousness. That's the phrase that she uses to describe pride. Moral ambitiousness. Set high standards for yourself. Keep yourself to those high standards. That's in your interest. That's the path to having that best kind of flourishing life that anybody can have. Okay, so just to wrap up. Touched on a lot of things really, really quickly. We can follow up on whatever you want. I'd like to underscore, she does see the virtues as egoistic. Some of the virtues she talks about are ones that many other religions and philosophies espouse. Some of them aren't. But in all cases, her reason for praising one of these as a virtue is not that it has any inherent claim on us, but that it's in your interest. It practically makes sense, okay? I also want to stress, she does think you need to live by the virtues in order to attain your well-being. They can't guarantee it. Nothing can give you that sort of guarantee in life, but living by virtue is the way that you'll be in the best possible shape to attain the flourishing life. Okay? So far from being the immoralist that she's often thought to be because she throws out altruism, she takes morality very seriously. And she takes herself and her own life seriously. At the same time, she takes morality seriously. Her attitude is, yeah, morality, I'm in it for me. Because I'm in my life for me, as you should be for yours. Because we only get one. And you have to take good care of your life in order to make it pay and to make it worthwhile. So, let's put it this way. Ayn Rand's egoism is in love with human happiness. That's the prize that she wants people to get, and this is the only way that she thinks you can get it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tara Smith. And now it's time to welcome Carl Rudbeck up on the stage. You're very welcome as well.
Do I need to do something with this?
No.
No. Thank you for inviting me. And I guess I'm here perhaps not as a devil's advocate, because Ayn Rand is usually the devil's advocate. So
this is true.
maybe I'm here as an angel's advocate. I would like you to start this discussion with asking you, how does Ayn Rand's philosophical system fit into the alternatives, mostly the utilitarian moral or the Kantian moral?
Okay. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the utilitarian and Kantian alternatives. The utilitarian view is basically largely associated with John Stuart Mill, but it's a view that says what we should care most about morally is the consequences of our actions, in particular the social utility, the social benefits that may come from my doing this or my doing that or my doing the other thing, right? So there's a whole host of people to this day who think the standard of value is consequence for public benefit. She definitely rejects that, okay? She is concerned with the consequences of our actions. I mean, there's an important similarity there in that she thinks morality, the whole reason to care about morality is because how you act makes a difference to what life is like. It makes a difference to what life is like for other people, but it makes a bigger difference even, has a bigger impact on what life is like for me. And the whole reason why a person should care about the consequences of action is primarily for his own interest. So there's a certain similarity, you know, there's definitely a similarity in the concern on the effects of our actions, or concern with that as important, but the primary beneficiary who she thinks you should be concerned with is the self. In that sense, it's not public benefit. And she has a lot more to say on public benefit, and again, we can come back to that. But let me just say a word about the Kantian alternative. Kant is known for the view that, I mean, essentially, you simply have certain duties. There are moral obligations that you have. It is in the nature of human beings that you have these obligations, and they are right regardless of consequences. I mean, there's the famous line, you know, may justice be done though the heavens may fall. And his moral theory really divorces the morality of action from the consequences of action, and that, she thinks, makes no sense. I mean, one of the, I think, the really revolutionary aspects of Rand's ethics is that she begins her ethics by asking, why be moral? Why care about this concept of value? And it's not that she ends up rejecting morality, as I was saying a minute ago. She takes it very seriously. But she thinks that in order to come up with a proper understanding of what morality demands of us, we need to begin at the beginning by asking, where does this whole concept, right, wrong, good, bad, valuable, disvaluable, where does this come from? Why does this make sense? She's not asking historically or anthropologically where does it come from, but conceptually, intellectually. Why does it make sense? Does it make sense for us to distinguish good, bad, valuable, not valuable? And it's from asking that question that she realizes, she goes back to the kind of naturalistic account I was talking about at the beginning, the fact that we, as living organisms, we have needs. And how we act makes a difference to our own survival and living and the quality of our lives. So in that sense, again, she's very focused on the effects of our actions, the consequences of our actions, long-term, big picture, the full panoply of the impact. And in that sense is completely opposed to the kind of Kantian view that says certain things, certain things are good in themselves, certain actions are just right in themselves. That's arbitrary. You know, it's not very reasonable in her view.
But I would like to return perhaps
Sure.
a moment or two to the utilitarian aspect, because it sounds to me that you could construct her philosophy as a utilitarianism, but it's individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. That's a good follow-up. It's, yeah, because I should distinguish on two grounds, I think. On the one hand, her concern is primarily for the individual, not at the expense of society, but not privileging social good, whatever that might be, which is another question, right? But not positioning benefit to others above benefit to oneself. So on the one hand, her view is much more individualistic. But I should also clarify, the way to gauge the effects of our actions or the consequences, in Rand's view, is not on a case-by-case basis. That is, she does argue that we need principles, not just calculators. You know, well, you know, what's the quick and dirty consequence going to be, even for me, if I take this action versus that action? No, we need to realize there are certain policies of action which over the long run will be most beneficial for us. And the kinds of virtues that I was speaking about toward the end of the presentation, right? Honesty, justice, productiveness. Those are the kinds of actions, the principles, the policies that will actually bring about the best consequences for you. Okay, so I do want to distinguish, it's not that kind of case-by-case, pragmatic, just make it up as you go along, maximize consequences. You need a systematic thoughtfulness about what is a good life, what is the target, what are the best ways of getting that, knowing that, you know, you can be very productive today in being rationally working, purposeful and all of that, but it's not always going to have the, you know, the greatest payoffs on a day-to-day basis, but that's the policy.
You introduced the subject, or you said more or less that man's duty is to be happy, to live a life which makes you flourish, to realize all your potential. During the course of your speech, doesn't this sort of make the word a little bit flat and a little bit poor? During the course of your speech, you made me think twice of Pascal. Had Pascal lived according to Ayn Rand, he would never have written his Pensées. He would have been a happy person rather than this miserable man sitting in a room writing masterpieces. Wouldn't that be one of the consequences of Ayn Rand? We might have happier people but fewer masterpieces. The second question would be, you talked about reason, that we should all live according to reason. And here Pascal enters the fray again, because he said something like this, that the heart has reasons which a reason does not understand. So
Okay.
reason is a much more problematic notion than you could say in your speech.
Okay, very interesting thoughts. So let me say a few things. First, I do want to say, Rand, just a quick clarification point. Rand does not believe you have a duty to be happy. But you have a choice. You want this life or not? If you want this life, why do I want this life? Do I want this life just so that I can have another bowl of cereal tomorrow morning and another bowl of muesli the next morning and another bowl of muesli? No. You want to live a fun life, right? A good life. We all know life when it's going well. When it's like, yeah, this is fun. This is good. I want more of this, right? That's what we want. So, but it is a choice. But what she's saying is, if you want that, then there are certain conditions that have to be met so that you can get it. Okay, so it's not a duty to be happy, but if that's what you want, then, you know, recognize the conditions that need to be satisfied to get it. Okay, but that's just a quick clarification about duty to be happy. If Pascal was miserable, that's a shame, right? I mean, no, she would not, and I would not endorse, oh, we need more miserable people to sacrifice their lives so that I can read this masterpiece. I don't want your miserable masterpiece. Now, I mean, that sounds very sarcastic or something. What is a masterpiece to some? Nobody owes his life to other human beings. I mean, one of her core beliefs is you know, your life is yours. Your life is a good thing if you want to make it that, if you want to have it. But nobody else has a claim on your life, including posterity for the wonderful masterpieces that some people consider masterpieces that you might have sacrificed your life for. Now, there is such a thing as working hard for one's passion in life, be it my passion to write philosophy, like maybe I'm Pascal, and maybe, oh boy, this is really hard. But the alternatives for me, Pascal, would be even worse. I'd be more miserable if I weren't grappling with these issues and writing what I'm writing, right? So we have to be careful in assessing what's worth it for whom. I mean, I love my work in philosophy, but let me tell you, many is the day that it's impossible and it's challenging and I'm pulling my hair out. But at the same time, I know this is so much fun. I love working out these issues, right? So there's a sense in which you could say, oh, Tara's miserable. She's so frustrated this week. It's really going hard, the writing and all. But there's a level, believe me, at the same time, I'm also conscious of there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. This is really satisfying to me, okay? So I do think some of our gauging of what is miserable, that also gets tricky. But definitely she would not say, oh, the world should have more miserable people so that the rest of us can enjoy their artworks or something, okay? So fascinating, though, that you bring up but the heart has its reasons, and reason is, you know, complicated. I definitely agree, and Rand would definitely agree, that reason is often misunderstood, or to the extent, I mean, she stresses rational egoism. Reason is the primary virtue. Reason is not at the expense of emotion. I mean, people often have this idea that to be reasonable is to be a robot and to have no heart, to have no soul, to have no feelings. Well, that's just false to what it is to be a human being. If any of you have ever read any of her fiction, I think part of what comes out really strongly in her good guys in the fiction, in their characters, is they are fiercely rational people and intensely emotional people. They are intensely in touch, and I mean, some of them even improve over the course of a novel in terms of being more and more in touch with their feelings, because it's their conviction that gives rise to an intensity, a wholeheartedness, you might say, a whole beingness in the experience that they're having. So this is a kind of, just very quick way of trying to say she doesn't believe in the head, the mind, at the expense of the heart, but she doesn't believe in, oh, just go with what your gut says, or just go with, emotion unchecked by reason. And again, the reason why you shouldn't is that's not going to help you navigate the world, right? Things are what they are. We have the natures, the needs that we have. We need to use our minds to grapple with them, but we also know as human beings, again, I was saying we're not just material beings. We have feelings. We have feelings other than physical feelings. You might feel hungry sometimes, right? You might feel a physical ache. You also might feel physically fine, but kind of bored in your life, or restless, right? Or frustrated. We have those sorts of feelings as well, and you need rationally to pay attention to that fact about yourself so that you can take the best care of the whole of your well-being, your emotional well-being, your intellectual well-being, and all. But a fascinating aspect of the whole issue, I think.
I don't know how long time I have, because you should let the floor in too, but one more question. When I was a young student, Nietzsche was coming back on vogue, and Walter Kaufmann's book was a standard, and everybody said, you present us with a sugar and honey version of Nietzsche. So much of what you say today, I think, can be accepted by also people who are not Randians. Are you not perhaps giving us a sugar and honey version of Ayn Rand? Because how otherwise describe the passionately hatred and fury she evokes in so many circles?
Okay, interesting. I mean, I could say, oh, she was just a pussycat. She was sugar and honey. No, no. Look, I'm trying to give, and that's a good. I'm trying to give you a quick insight into what her view is and isn't. I do think she's been largely misrepresented by people who don't want to understand her because it's radical. And that's why at the very end I just quickly said, I want to underscore this is egoism. This is egoism. Mother Teresa is no saint, according to me or according to Ayn Rand, okay? It is not the right thing to do to put other people before yourself. That's stupid, that's self-defeating. That doesn't get anybody the best kind of life that they can have. So she is saying radical things. I'm not trying to qualify that in any way. If you look at what she says about what it is to be a good person, she elaborates on the kinds of things I quickly gave you a preview of, right? She says you should be honest, not self-sacrificially for the good of him, but because faking things doesn't change them. It's stupid. It doesn't help the other guy. It doesn't help me. That's why you should be honest. So even when you, and again, you can do this with various of the virtues. Some of which, I mean, everybody loves justice, yeah, and they tend to mean egalitarianism by it, or judge not, turn the other cheek. No, and I go into this more in my book where, I'll have like a whole chapter on justice. And her version of justice, it ain't sugar and honey compared to what most people believe these days, okay? So I would urge you to read more about her views to get the, what she's actually saying. Pride, pride, oh, that's a sin. Humility is a virtue. No. Pride. Set high standards for yourself. be honest with yourself when you haven't lived up to them, right? Justice, judge others objectively, judge yourself objectively too, in Ayn Rand's view. So the whole thing is fueled not by sugar and honey, which is a great way of putting it, but by just ruthless looking at reality and getting what's real and going by that to try to land us all in the land of sugar and honey, I guess, something like that.
Well, sadly, this seminar is soon reaching its end, so we'll have time for some questions from the floor.
Sit down.
Yes. Thank you, Carl. And this is the only microphone, so I'm moving back here. Please present yourself.
My name is Fredrik Segerfeldt. I'm a libertarian writer. I talk about flourishing and happiness for the individual, but very often we have conflict and we have scarcity. And so your flourishing and your happiness would come into conflict with other people's. And the most obvious way of dealing with those, with interaction with other people, of course, is free exchange, capitalism, whatever. But sometimes free exchange cannot solve the conflict with other people over happiness or over flourishing. How do we then find just ways of dealing with these conflicts?
Okay, let me just say a little bit quickly. Rand endorses a view that most people find, when you first hear it, oh my God, how could that possibly be true? She says there are no conflicts between rational men's interests. And what she means by that is, to the extent we are being rational, going by the right principles in the pursuit of our interests, and we have a good, objectively valid idea of what is in our interest, human interests will not conflict. Now, human desires will sometimes conflict for sure. We both want the same thing that only one of us can get. We both want the same girl that only one of us can get. We both want the same job, right? But remember, wanting something doesn't mean it's actually necessarily in your interest, or that any way of getting it will be in your interest. So human relationships, in her view, and again, all this I'd need to say a lot more about to flesh out and defend, but human relationships are essentially win-win. That is, when I'm rationally pursuing my interest and you are yours, right? If I'm just the thief who wants to pick your pocket, no, then then my success is at your loss. You lost your wallet, right? But if I'm rational and you're rational and we understand only one of us can get the job, we also understand that the kind of business that's going to hire somebody has got to try to go by what it deems is the best person for the job. And disappointed as I may be, and set back and making my plans as I may be, if I don't get that job, I wouldn't be better off big picture if they made a bad decision to hire me and then they go out of business, a year down the road because they just keep they just keep hiring the less appropriate person for the job. So my point there is simply, a lot goes into figuring out what is really beneficial for a person. It's not always superficially obvious, right? And to the extent that we're rational in pursuing our interests, life isn't a zero-sum game. I mean, lower forms of animals, they have to fight one another to some extent because they're just fighting for a fixed hunk of meat, so to speak, right? We're the creative animal. We're the rational innovator. We can keep coming up with ways of having better standards of living, even though we've been extracting things from the earth for a hell of a long time now. How is that possible? It's possible because we use our minds. We come up with better ideas, better ways of doing things. We're better off from so many of the kinds of exchanges and interactions, not just material trade, but certainly material trade, as well as others that we have from other people. So human relationships, when they're properly pursued, are not at core adversarial. Again, I'd need to go into that a lot more, but it's an important idea anyway.
We'll take a few questions at the same time, and then we'll wrap this up. We'll take a few questions at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. I wonder, from what I understood, you argue from the point that it doesn't matter how you act towards someone, they will still be the same person, no matter how long the relationship is.
I'm not sure I understand. I'm sorry.
When you talked about the relationship between an employee and an employer, you said that you have to have an objectivist view on other people, and no matter what you do, you cannot change them.
Oh.
And so I wondered if you really do believe that people are static and that you cannot affect them.
Oh, okay. Shall I go ahead?
We'll take the two last questions.
Okay.
Thank you. I was wondering if you think that developments in neuroscience has any bearing or relevance here. I was thinking of what seems to be facts, like the act of giving or the act of being unselfish rewards us with the brain releasing various whatever
Certain
the brain
flows of
release
dopamine or something
stuff like
that.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
So whether that has any and also if she were aware of the brain sort of functioning this way.
Okay.
And the last question.
I think my question might be related to the last one. Perhaps it could be in your own self-interest to actually help other people. If you look at people you know who lead flourishing lives, they often have many friends, they raise kids in a good way, and doing that is, I mean, if you have a friend, you know, it means that you sometimes have to be there, even though it doesn't, well, it's for your own good.
Doesn't seem like there's a real payoff.
But in the long run, it's good for all of us. So could it be that in practice it's actually not so egotistic as you would suspect?
Okay. Why don't I take them in reverse order? Okay. She's not against helping other people. She's against self-sacrifice. Okay, but there's right self-sacrifice. I put somebody else ahead of myself. That doesn't entail I never do anything for another person. If I value another person, it can make a great deal of sense for me to do things for that other person. Whether, it might be a child, it might be the person I love, right? My husband, my wife, my partner, right? It might be a good friend, right? But, so she's against putting their interest above your own in some sense that's actually going to be detrimental to you in the long run, big picture, right? But she is all for, she has nothing against, honest, she has nothing against charity. She doesn't think there's an obligation, there's a duty, or that his need means you owe him. That's what she's against, okay? And one of my books is on the virtues of egoism, and so there are specific chapters on all of her virtues, and then I have a chapter in which I talk about, what about charity? What about kindness? What about generosity? And what about temperance? I take on 4 things that are often thought to be virtues. Where does her view stand on those, okay? So in there, I talk in more depth about, particularly relevant here, I think, both charity and generosity. And one of the things I say is, it can make sense relative to your values, if and when you can do so without sacrifice, to be generous with other people, to be giving. So I completely take the spirit, I think, of your question, which is, sometimes it makes a lot of sense, but again, a lot of sense in terms of my selfish well-being, to take good care of the other people I really care about who enhance my life, okay? So that can be not sacrifice, but there can be, there often is rational self-interest in caring about others' well-being, okay? Neuroscience, I'm a little impatient with neuroscience myself. It can tell us wonderful things about what lights up your brain waves, right? But I guess 1 or 2 just quick things. A flow of dopamine or a flow of this chemical or whatever is nothing more than that. I think a lot of people read things into the discoveries of neuroscience that cannot be logically generated by those things. Now, I'm all for the study of the brain and the study of you know, neurons and chemicals and all of that stuff for certain purposes. I mean, there's stuff that it can do for us that can really help us, but drawing conclusions about what is morally good and bad, those seem completely unjustified. Also, suppose it does make you feel good, not just, you know, light up the chemical picture of what's going on in your brain. Suppose it does make you feel good to treat other people a certain way. Feeling is not the standard of well-being. Going by our feelings is not the way to, I mean, that is not the appropriate standard to go by to figure out what I should do. So also I think from that angle she would come at that. And then finally getting back to the question, which I think had to do with justice and judging other people. Okay, I didn't mean to suggest, so I'm glad you give me a chance to clarify here. You know, when I discussed the virtue of justice, judge other people objectively, treat them accordingly, realize the fact that faking their character doesn't change their character, right? I didn't mean to imply that you can never have an impact on other people. You can. I mean, you can. Hopefully I'm having some impact on you today. Hopefully the people I listen to, and I really try to listen, sometimes more than others, but I really try to, right? No, we can affect one another for sure. My point was simply, in the moment, you know, if I kid myself when I'm judging another person or even an impersonal fact, that, you know, kidding myself, that doesn't change the fact, right? I can change myself in you know, I can dye my hair. I can develop a better serve in tennis over time, right? I might be able to change your mind on certain things and make you a sports fan of a certain kind or whatever it might, right? So we can affect one another, but not through the simple act of denying what we actually know to be their character at a certain point in time, right? If I want to train a worker at my company to be better at a certain skill, I can do that over time and hopefully be efficacious at doing that. But I just meant the judgment per se doesn't change the fact. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tara, and thank you, Carl Rudbeck. See you all.